Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone. It's 3 in the afternoon Eastern time, so we will go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all and thank you for attending our AMLE webinar today on promoting personal wellness during COVID-19. I'm Stephanie Auditor, I'm the CEO at AMLE, and I just want to say how absolutely impressed I've been by our members' ability to adapt to and support their school communities during this really challenging time. I am so in awe of what you've been able to do for your students and for their families. And we felt like we really needed to equip you with some resources to promote your own personal wellness. We know how stressful it can be supporting those around you. So we want to make sure that you're also prioritizing your own wellness. And so we are hosting this event today with Jennifer Piella as our expert. She has over 20 years of experience in the wellness industry, and she spent time working as a wellness consultant with a variety of clients, including nonprofit community partners and Fortune 500 companies. Her most recent focus of stress management in the workplace has grown corporate initiatives such as on-site meditation classes, calm spaces, leadership training and stress management, and more. As a yoga teacher and health coach, Jen brings a unique and energizing perspective to the workplace and to the health and well-being of our employees. With that, I'll pass it over to Jen and let her take it from here.
Thank you, Stephanie. It is a pleasure to be with you all. I wish it were under different circumstances, of course, but this is a great time to start to give resources to you all. I know that there has been a lot of things thrown at you, some challenges that are unprecedented, that I definitely 100% stand behind the fact that we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as we go through and continue to support all of the families through just the unknown of what lies ahead. So today, I just want to take a brief moment. She did a great job of introducing me, but there I am. Put a little face to a name for you. I am a corporate wellness consultant, and I have a variety of clients that I've worked with, from nonprofit to Fortune 500 companies, and main specialization is in stress management, working with the culture of organizations to talk about how we're supporting our employees through stressful times to help with their well-being as well as efficiencies. And then also, I'm a yoga teacher. I own a yoga program, and you'll probably hear a little bit of those nuances as I talk through stress management specialties today. But I think that's an important kind of background to give you as we go through some of maybe the stress management techniques that we'll practice at the end of this webinar. So to give just a little bit of an overview of what to expect over the course of the next few minutes together, just addressing just the stress that is inevitable in this time of uncertainty and unknown. Talk a little bit about signs and symptoms of stress overload so that you can identify and understand when stress is hitting. We will focus a lot on whole person wellness. So I think there's probably some assumptions when we talk about wellness and joining in on a wellness webinar that, we're going to talk about exercise and nutrition, and I'm not saying that we won't talk about those things, but we want to talk about the bigger picture that contributes to our wellness and well-being. And then we will end with some specific stress management techniques. So I do want to give you an actual practical experience today before you leave. So hopefully, we can sit back and relax into that and feel good about that. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So anytime we start talking about stress management, and I like to share a story, but before I do that, I do want to start with kind of just the foundational statement that each person is going to respond to stress in a different and unique way. And I think in this moment that we're in this landscape and environment that we're in, where this is something that none of us have experienced before, the changes are coming at us on a regular basis. Just a couple statements of it's okay to feel what you're feeling right now. There's this fear that can come along with just not knowing, not having a blueprint, not having a roadmap as to how to navigate the changes that come at us on a regular basis. You're changing the way you work, you're changing the way you support your families, you're changing the way you go about your days. And with that change, providing yourself perhaps a little bit of grace to be okay with however it comes about and however it presents itself in your own life, but also being understanding and compassionate of those around you, understanding again that the stress will be perceived and responded to and received in a different way by each person. So let's go ahead and get started in this story. This is a story that maybe some of you have heard of before, but it's a story about relative weight. And the story begins with a professor standing in front of his class, and he holds up a water bottle, very much like the one you see on the screen. And he asks the class, how heavy do you think this water bottle is? And so he waits for a response, and he gets a variety of responses. You know, is it empty? Is it full? It's 16 ounces, maybe it's a pound, you know, whatever. And the professor responds back, well, relatively speaking, the weight of this water bottle is it's light, right? I can pick it up, I can put it down, and it's like a blip on my radar. I don't feel any strain. I barely even think about it. The class agrees, yes, relatively speaking, it's a light piece. So then the professor moves forward and he says, well, what if I picked up this water bottle and I was told for the rest of the day, I can't put it down? And he asks, does the relative weight of the water bottle change? Does my perception of how heavy it is change? Well, of course, when we pick up something and we're told we can't put it down the rest of the day, there's going to be a lot of changes in our perception of the weight of it. Yeah, it's going to probably become a little bit bothersome. It's going to get in my way a little bit. I probably will focus on it when I shouldn't be focusing on it. I might even start to feel some physical strains. You know, my hands start to cramp a little, or I just get annoyed with it. So yes, relatively speaking, the weight changes. So he takes it one step further. The last step, then he says, well, what happens if I'm told to pick up this water bottle and I cannot put it down? And I never put it down. I carry it with me day in and day out. What changes then? Does the relative weight of it change? And of course, the class agrees, yes, it changes. I mean, think about all of the things that happen. I start to physically feel annoyed by this water bottle, but physically I feel maybe some strain. I start to get tired. I have aches and pains from holding on to it. My sleep is disrupted. Perhaps my interpersonal relationships are challenged because I'm not focusing on what you're saying, because I'm thinking about this water bottle in my hand. It's this constant kind of boulder and full of pebbles. It's something that I'm focusing on nonstop. And so the relative weight of it becomes almost crushing. Something that was very simple and light to begin with, when I never set it down, became incredibly heavy. So the professor kind of wraps this up by saying this is not unlike our own stresses and the things that occur to us. When we start to feel the stresses of every day or different challenges that are popping up at us, if we do not take the time to manage our reactions to those stresses and our responses to those stresses, if we don't take the time to rest and recover, to take care of our own well-being, the stresses themselves will become the issue, right? The stresses themselves will become much heavier and much more burdensome than they actually intended to be in the beginning. So as we are looking at our landscape now, as we're looking at the status of our environment and our world right now, we start to look at a variety of stresses that are coming at us. The changes are immense. And we need to kind of look at the priority of taking care of ourselves. It's this concept of setting down the water bottle. You know, the proverbial just rest and relaxation, and really take care of ourselves through self-care, stress management techniques. And that's why this is so important. That's why we're talking about this today. You cannot be of help to others if you are not well yourself. So this is our priority. So moving forward, as we start to talk about stress, one of the things that I like to kind of talk about is this continuum of stress. Now, there's a good amount of stress that we all need to experience for growth and challenge. That's that eustress, the eustress. We want to have that happening on a regular basis, or else we become stagnant. But as we move across that continuum, there then becomes what we refer to as tolerable stress. The stress isn't as positive, but it's something that we can manage. Typically, the event causing the stress comes and goes, and then we manage the emotions afterwards, or the aftermath later. And then as we move through the continuum on the far end of it, we start to feel what's called toxic stress. And toxic stress is almost like chronic stress. It's stress that is continual. It's stress that perhaps we're not managing in effective ways. And that's when we start to feel some physical effects and mental and emotional effects of that. So this is what we want to start to have as maybe our awareness of red flags. When we get to that toxic stress level, we understand stress management is a priority, but when we're at that toxic stress level or when it becomes unmanageable, that's when stress management and our well-being becomes the absolute priority, because we need to kind of control and contain that response to stress. So this is when we start to look at what are these red flags? How does stress appear? We look at 4 different sections of when we're in that toxic stress. First one is in physical ways. So these are probably ones that are very familiar to most of us, but aches and pains, we start to see some red flags if we're experiencing a lot of stress. And these are all things I don't want to dwell on, but I do want to make sure that if you start to experience these, we're not just writing them off as, oh, I'm tired, or I just need to get some more rest. Yes, maybe that's true, but we also have to understand that that could be stress, contributing to some of these feelings. So we need to mitigate it. We need to start to manage it better. Lower immunity starts to happen when we're feeling high levels of stress, which, obviously in the situation that we're in, we absolutely do not want that. And then GI distress, so gastrointestinal distress, fatigue happens, heart palpitations aren't uncommon, and then blood pressure changes. And these are just this is just a small sampling of some of the physical responses that we could have to stress. Change in eating habits, so perhaps we're eating more or less, or we're eating things outside of our quote unquote normal. Maybe we're typically on the healthier side of eating. We start to eat more comfort foods or look to that to help calm down our emotions. Then we have emotional symptoms of stress. Weepy, it's a very clinical term, right? Weepy, we become weepy, but we just become a little bit more unstable with our emotions. Perhaps irritable. So if any of you are quarantined with significant others, maybe you have no clue what I'm talking about right now, but irritability starts to increase as stress increases. We become irrational. We have highs and lows in our emotions, and we have difficulty self-regulating. So, with this is basically, I understand that I'm being irrational, but I'm not doing anything to change that. So I don't regulate my emotions in the way that I typically could. And then motivation starts to weaken. So again, we have physical, emotional, and then our next column would be behavioral changes that start to happen because of stress, more coping behaviors, and often those are unhealthy. So we see an increase in tobacco, alcohol, or drug use. Change in responsibility or respect shown. So this is one I like to kind of point out, when I work in the corporate sector or start to talk about that, this is like if you are normally a very conscientious person and you start to maybe procrastinate a bit more, or you push off responsibilities onto somebody else because essentially you're tired. All of your energy is going towards this stress that's kind of zapping your resources, your personal resources. So we start to see a change in responsibility or what you're taking on. Or that might even fall into change in respect shown. So we often see, again, in the workplace, insubordination, maybe a lack of respect. Again, simply that might tie back into some of those emotional effects that we're feeling because of stress. Sleeping pattern changes, so perhaps we want to sleep more or less, again, because of all of this energy being zapped. And then social withdrawal. So this is unique because we talk about stress and high levels of stress, this being a signal. Obviously, right now, we're being encouraged to socially withdraw. So it's kind of a double-edged sword right now. If someone is already wanting to withdraw because they're having high levels of stress, and then there's not even an opportunity to connect socially, we are in a unique challenge with that. So we'll talk about that in a second here. And then the last column here is the cognitive aspect, so how we're thinking about things. And with the cognitive aspect, we tend to have heightened worry, we start to worry a little bit more. When we have higher levels of stress for longer periods of time, we see a correlation between anxiety and depression. So moving from just experiencing stressful events to actually mental health concerns is not an uncommon path that happens. So again, just validating the importance of understanding that stress is a real thing. It's a real health concern, and it's really something that we want to do our best to manage in the best way that we can. Difficulty focusing. So I have a hard time figuring out what you're saying, paying attention, or staying with the conversation, or even, even if it's in a workplace, staying with what I need to be doing. And then we tend to see negative attitudes increase, so pessimistic tendencies. And, all of this is probably not news to you, when we look at this. But again, I start in this not to dwell on the effects of stress, but to, again, validate, to make sure that we understand it's because it can't be seen. Stress is often written off as just this thing, and it's just in your head, and it's just something you have to deal with. But the reality is as more and more research gets done, and as we start to pay more attention to it, we understand that the mind-body, the psychosomatic connection between how we think and how we feel, and what that does to our well-being overall, is largely impactful. So we really want to make sure that it's not just the thing that we write off. This is real, and this is really important in that way. So now that we know, these are all our red flags, not all of them, there's plenty more, but, a sampling of some of the red flags if stress is appearing in heightened levels, or we're to that toxic part of the spectrum. So how do we do something about it? What do we do from here? What I'd like to introduce to you is this concept of the whole person wellness. So again, I said, I think when we join a webinar and it says, let's promote personal well-being or personal wellness, there's sometimes still an assumption that what I'm going to talk to you about is going to be what you eat and how much you move, right? I'm going to talk to you about exercise and diet, where I really like to kind of take a bigger picture, a step back and look at the whole person. And so, yes, we have the physical aspect of it, of what we eat and how much we move, very much contributes to our well-being. But we also have a variety of other sectors that we're going to look at today. So if you look at this wellness wheel, this is one, if you were to Google the wellness wheel, go on your computers and check it out. There's a variety of different ones that you can see out there. But we can do kind of our own survey of inventory of how we're doing in each of these sectors if we pay attention to it. Now, ideally, a well person, someone who is really contributing to the big picture of their whole person well-being, would have kind of a good score in each of these 8 areas. The reality is that I think very few people do. We may be really great at moving a lot. I may have a great exercise program, or I might be managing my stress really well, but I could be maybe disconnected and not have a whole lot of social interaction. So does that make me well? Just because physically I'm doing well, let's also pay attention to these other areas as well. So we have the social, spiritual, financial, environmental, emotional, intellectual, physical, and occupational. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of these, again, high level. And the intention with mentioning this is to give you some things to think about. As we're schedules are being changed, and as we're home, distancing ourselves from others, it gives us this opportunity to pay attention to our own well-being and what that means. So let's go ahead and kind of start with the social. So again, in the social well-being, what we're talking about when we talk about that is our connectedness with others, how we interact. Now, obviously, we are hearing the word social distancing. That's the intention of what we're doing right now to help slow down this curve, right? To help slow down this virus from spreading. So in this way, what we can start to think about and what we can be creative with is how we connect virtually. Doing a great job here. Even if you're sitting and watching a webinar, you're still somewhat connected to others. You hear someone else's voice. You can hear that conversation, and I think that's value. We have to be creative in those approaches. So look at phone calls, look at FaceTime, emails, text, reach out to others. And I think, again, this is going to be a time that there has to be, more than others, a very purposeful approach to our wellness. That means that we have things that would normally just naturally occur, like social interaction because we go to work or because we have visits with family, that are being taken away from us in this situation. So this is a time where we have to have a purposeful approach to our wellness on a daily basis. We have to make this intentional movement towards our wellness. So again, reaching out to others, even social media to a certain extent can help connect us to others. There is some comfort in knowing, I think if we look at any feed right now, if you pull up Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, there's some comfort in knowing that, others are going through this. There's other teachers out there, there's other educators out there, there's other parents out there that are kind of experiencing this kind of challenge of the world around us. Now, in that comfort, we also put an asterisk because I would, I caution too much time in social media. There is a time where we do have to put it down, where we have to step away from the news, from the social media, from the media in general, because the barrage of news stories are coming at us. Yes, stay educated, stay in the know of what's happening in the newest developments, but know when enough is enough. Know when it's becoming detrimental to your mental well-being, to your physical well-being, and that too. So and understanding that, yes, social media or media in general with an asterisk, we know boundaries well. So then moving on to spiritual. Spiritual, again, this can be defined as, when we're looking at our wellness, this can be defined as just a belief in something bigger. And if that's religion for you, then great. But it can also be just surrounding yourself with positive material. Again, I come back to this kind of this theme that you're going to hear from me, is that this has to be intentional and purposeful actions each day for our well-being in all of these areas, because we need to purposefully surround ourselves with positive things as this is happening, and even past this time in our lives. But looking at quotes or books or music, whatever it may be. In the spiritual realm too, we also talk about the altruistic and maybe even this idea of volunteering, offering your services, again, virtually, and being creative, but having just a different way to interact with others and kind of create that, maybe that feel-good buffer. When we look at this, think about the things that make you feel good, and that is contributing to your wellness. These are building blocks, and really what we're seeking out are these moments of feeling good. And as many of these moments as we can string together in a day is going to help our overall well-being, especially when stress is hitting hard or when we're being challenged. So financial being challenged in this time because we have a lot who are out of work. We have, these uncertainties of what's happening financially. This is time to kind of maybe just take a review, look at your expenses, see what you can control. And that's a really big kind of theme as well, is understanding the things that are under our control and what is not. But is this an opportunity to kind of look at reprioritizing our budget? Is it an opportunity to look at wants versus needs? And these are all things, again, that can go into contributing to our improved wellness and well-being. And then environment. So I'm a huge believer that the status of your environment reflects the status of your mind. So if I have a cluttered desk, I believe that my mind's a little bit cluttered. So this is a perfect time to organize, declutter, maybe revitalize a space. You're home now. We're being asked to stay home. Is it a place that you want to be? And if not, can you create this comfort and this feel-good space that will contribute to your overall mental and physical well-being? So looking at all of these opportunities, it's not just about moving and exercise and diet and all of that. It's about bigger opportunities out there. So moving on to the last four aspects of it, emotional well-being. So when we talk about our emotional well-being, this is an excellent time to look into the opportunities that you might have with your employee assistance program, your EAP, therapy, counseling. There's a lot of virtual opportunities with that too. So if you find that where we're at right now is causing stress that's maybe beyond that place that's tolerable, and when I talked about the spectrum of good stress, tolerable stress, toxic stress, if we're getting beyond that place that's tolerable, this is a great time to reach out. know the value of talking to somebody else, and kind of, remove the stigma of what may be there when we seek therapy or counseling, and know that it's actually very beneficial for our mental well-being overall. Even if we're not feeling challenged, or if we're not feeling like it's not manageable right now, or stress isn't manageable, it's still valuable to have a person to connect with. One of the things that I like to talk about is, many of us, or most of us, hopefully have a primary care physician. The primary care physician, we go and we do well checks. When we're not sick, we go and just get kind of check the status of my health right now. I think in mental health, there's value in finding a therapist as well. Find a well check when you're not feeling stressed, or when you're not feeling unwell, or when you don't feel like it's like a last ditch effort. Go and create that relationship with a mental health professional, so that when stress hits, or when things become a little bit shaky, we have an established baseline, and we have someone that we can reach to and talk to that knows us well. This is also emotional when we start to talk about connecting with others. Find your support group, and that kind of goes back to that social interaction and social well-being. But reach out to other educators, reach out to other people and who are in similar situations, who understand where you're coming from. If this is a challenging time for you, and if you start to feel the weight of it. And meditate. I will promote meditation. I think a lot of times people kind of cringe if you're not used to it, or if you haven't been around meditation. It is becoming a lot more streamlined now. And we'll talk about some resources at the end here, but meditation can be a huge, huge thing when it comes to our emotional well-being, and our mental well-being, and how we manage our stress. Intellectual well-being, again, some resources or some ideas that we can start to continue to improve this area of our well-being. Read, create, challenge your mind, learn a new skill, do some puzzles, write, journal, do something that still challenges your mental, the intellectual aspect of where we're at. And I think, there's the kind of the cathartic experience of journaling. Going through this time, it's unique. This is history, literally history in the making right now. And documenting our thoughts, documenting our experiences can be something that could be very beneficial for our mental processes, and how we process all of the events that are happening around us. And then physical. This is one, I think you probably assume that we were going to talk about this a lot, but yeah, this physical well-being is just one of the many arms of our well-being, of our wellness in whole. So it is very important. I think, again, how we feel in body is how we feel in mind. How we feel in mind is how we feel in body. There's a connection between both, going two ways. And so if you think about, how it feels when we move a little bit, if I don't have a schedule, a strict schedule that I need to be following right now, and I sleep in, or I go away from my normal wake up time, and I kind of lounge around all day, the energy just sinks. And when we have low energy in our physical body, I think we tend to see that happening mentally as well. Yes, we need rest. Yes, we need recovery, but we also need the other aspect of it. We need movement. Our body craves that movement. So getting up and moving around, walking, there's no restrictions to going outside and taking a walk. Do it with distance of others, but go outside and walk, or just move around. There's a lot of virtual opportunities happening. I have some resources at the end of the apps that you can look at, and even on YouTube or any of the social media outlets, you'll see a lot of these virtual opportunities to just move and do something. It doesn't have to be a sweat session of 60 minutes and you're doing jumping jacks. It just simply has to do 5 or 10 minutes here and there to get our blood pumping and wake us up a little bit. Yoga falls into that too. I'm, again, obviously very biased, but a huge proponent of yoga and its benefits, not just the physical, but the mental and emotional benefits that come from that. This also falls in, sleep will fall under our physical well-being. So making sure, if stress is hitting you hard and you find yourself having disruptive sleep, looking at the opportunities to either do some relaxation rituals before you go to sleep. So that might be listening to to calming music or even do a meditation. It could be a warm bath before you go to bed, reading, turn off all the electronic devices, but try to, we call it sleep hygiene. So try to make sure that your sleep hygiene is protected. We're still looking at quality sleep, even as stress is hitting, because the sleep is going to be one of the things that our mental well-being will need the most of. Eat well, and limit alcohol intake. Again, challenging if you're quarantined, but limit it. Occupational. So again, the last arm of this, then occupational, obviously this is the biggest, or one of the biggest challenges that we're talking about here, because you've been asked to change the way you work. Many of us have been. And so with this, we have to be creative of how do we approach it. And I think continue to learn and grow and be flexible, develop through, and you have a webinar. You're on a webinar right now. This is a great opportunity, but virtual learning environments. And continue to be, just simply because the way you used to do it now cannot happen right now, doesn't mean it can't happen at all. So the goal remains the same. We continue to grow and take care of ourselves, but the approach is flexible. How we do it changes, and we're resilient in that change. So I encourage you again, just to be creative as possible as we go through our big picture of what it looks like to be well. So I want to, again, throwing all these ideas at you, that's a lot. I just went through the 8 limbs of that really quick. But again, it's something to give you to think about. We get pigeonholed into, well, I can't work out, my gym's closed, or I don't really want to eat healthy today. I'd rather just sit on the couch and have potato chips or whatever. When we get into those, we have to have maybe this creativity to think bigger than that. But there are other things. If you're not feeling like moving a whole lot today physically, is there something else that you can do from one of the other areas of your well-being? Is there something else that you can do for your intellectual well-being? Is there something else you can do for your emotional well-being? So again, being creative, but this is going to be that intentional and purposeful actions every day to increase our well-being and to keep us strong, because stress is going to be challenging our well-being from all angles, especially in the environment that we're in right now. So that being said, we looked at big picture well-being. I do want to focus a little bit more on the stress management aspect. So stress management can, and again, is supported by our physical, our emotional, all of the well-beings that we talked about. And how we handle stress is going to be improved by our big state of well-being. But we also have to look at specific techniques in the moment. So as stress is hitting me, what's one of the things that I can do to manage my stress? What's one of the things that I can do to mitigate it in the moment? It's that proverbial setting down of the water bottle, the story that we talked about at the beginning. So with the stress management technique, I'd like to walk through one with you. And this is, breath work is probably one of the most powerful ones that we can use when it comes to stress management. First of all, it's accessible. We don't need any specialized equipment. We have our breath with us at all times. But let me give a little bit of background as to why it's so impactful. Breath work. Again, this is going to be a little bit of my background as a yogi, as a yoga teacher, but it's believed that we have these 3 rhythms in our body. We have our breath, so how quickly we're breathing in and out, how deep we're breathing in and out. We have our thoughts, our thought rhythm, so our cognitive rhythm, which is, what's going across my mind space at any given time. And then we have our heart rhythm, so how quickly my heart is beating at any given time or how slowly it is. Now, these 3 rhythms are so intertwined that as one rhythm goes up, the rest go up, and as one goes down, the rest go down. So if you think about this is, evolutionarily speaking, when we used to be running from saber-toothed tigers or have these threats in our environment, we would have to have our heart rate go up because we fight or we flee, right? We go, we have that kind of response to the threat. And so our heart rate goes up, our breath goes up, and the thoughts start going because I need to figure out how to survive. So that's in that period of time, that was my acute stress. The stress happened, then the thing causing the stress, the tiger, went away, and hopefully I survived. And then my levels came back down. My heart rate slowed back down. My thoughts slowed back down and my breath slowed back down. Now, unfortunately, as we've evolved, our stresses aren't so acute anymore. They're chronic. We constantly have a variety of different stresses. Perhaps they're not the extreme of a tiger chasing us, but they're still there on a regular basis. And so what we find is most people have heightened levels of these rhythms. Our heart rate is often higher than it needs to be. Our breath is a little bit shallow and faster. And that means that our mind space tends to be cluttered. We have a hard time concentrating and focusing. So when we look at how do we manage stress, we want to bring those levels back down, because when we bring the levels back down, we experience relaxation. We experience a little bit of a release in our mind space. We experience a physical relaxation when our heart rate and our breath starts to slow. So of those three levels, the only one we have control over is our breath, because we can't really focus on our heart rate. We can't slow it down unless it's really about slowing down our breath or slowing down our body. And our thought rhythm, if I told you to stop thinking, you probably can't stop thinking. It's a very difficult thing to just stop thinking. So what we do is we manipulate our breath. So breath work, again, long story as to why this is so impactful, but it's true. It's why it is. So the exercise that I'm going to bring you through today is a counted breath. And I am going to invite you to participate in this. So if it's safe for you to do so, you can sit back in your chair, close your eyes, just start to relax the shoulders down and take a deep breath in through the nose and back out through the nose. And allow that breath just coming in and out, not manipulating it, just let it be natural. Perhaps relax the shoulders even more, let the hands rest in the lap. You can let the head sway from side to side for a moment. And as you continue to breathe, notice that there's two parts to the breath. There's the inhale as the breath is coming into the body. And then there's the exhale as the breath is exiting out. And just notice those two parts, inhale and exhale. What I'll have you do is we're going to start to count the breath. So continue to breathe, continue to keep the eyes closed. But let me explain the counted breath. By rule of thumb, if we want to create a relaxing situation, a relaxing breath, our inhale is shorter than the exhale. So we have inhale, you can count to 4 on your own count. So take a deep breath in, up to 4 counts. And again, that's essentially like seconds. 1, 2, 3. And the exhale is anywhere from 6 to 8 counts. So make it nice, long, drawn out exhale. And I'll have you stay with your count. If I were to count the whole time for you, it becomes a little bit anxiety-inducing. This is such an individual practice. So again, inhale for 4 counts on your own count. And then let the exhale be longer, anywhere from 6 to 8 counts. And continue to do that. A couple rounds of it. Again, 4 counts in. The long, drawn, slow exhale out. Let's do one more. And let it back out. And you can go ahead and open up the eyes if you've closed them. Let the breath just come back to a natural inhale and exhale. Couple things that I'll point out. Hopefully what you found is as that exhale becomes nice and long, you start to feel all of the air exit the body, the shoulders relax, the body relaxes. That's the intention of the relaxation breath, or the relaxing kind of pattern that we've done. Again, inhale is shorter than the exhale. Now, with this, when we start to manipulate our breath, it's not uncommon to feel a little bit loopy about it. Breath is such a kind of an innate response to our body. It's automatic. And so when we start to manipulate it, it can cause some of us to feel like we're hyperventilating or get a little bit dizzy. If that is happening to you, let go of the counts. Just let the breath move in and out and pay attention to it, because that by definition is going to be relaxing when we pay attention to something that's automatic and allow ourselves to be aware of that movement. We can still get some of the same benefits of this breath pattern. Now you'll look at the screen. We also have a couple other patterns that you can utilize. You can have a balancing breath, so it's an equal inhale, equal exhale, so 4 counts out, 4 counts in. And with that, that's going to be if you're feeling distracted. If we're having a difficult time focusing, it can be that balancing breath can be an equal inhale and exhale. And then lastly, we have the energizing breath. By definition, the energizing breath is a long, deep inhale and a short, quick, faster exhale. So, if you think about this, these are very natural. So if we go back to kind of this relaxing breath, that's going to be like a big sigh is a relaxing breath. Whereas the energizing is going to be that deep breath in. All right, let's go. Right? And so we do these naturally, but when we start to identify these as patterns that we can use when stress hits or when we're feeling certain emotions, when that familiar tightness of anxiety or the heightened levels of stress start to feel, through our body or through our thoughts, we can start to just do a couple of these breaths. And really it only takes a cycle or two before we start to feel the effects of what we're looking for. So relaxing, balancing, or energizing. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Hopefully that resonates with you. I highly recommend utilizing it as much as possible. Again, super accessible. It's right there. Just take a deep breath, and that's all we need to do. And then another example of this is the triangle breath, and this might be familiar to you. We use this in Calm Classroom, but the triangle breath, breathe in for 3 counts, hold for 3 counts, and breathe out for 3 counts. So that's a visual one that can work if you want to close the eyes and start to kind of draw that triangle with your breath in your mind. Just a different approach to how we do our counted breath. But that's going to be, if you look at that, all the areas are equal, right? So that's going to be a more balancing and grounding breath than anything else. So definitely an option there. And then another thing that I'd like to talk about with stress management is just this idea of a purposeful pause. I'm going to share with you, this quote. This is from Viktor Frankl from Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So I like to call this out when we're talking about stress management, because stress management and how we stay well in terms of our mental well-being has a lot to do with how we think. So when you look at this concept of the space or the pause, the power is in that pause. When we take a moment to step away from the stress as it's hitting and to step away from the challenges that are coming at us, and we pause, we can take a few moments to kind of regain our strength in terms of how we respond to the stress, to a situation, to a challenge. So it's this concept of reaction versus response. Reaction is emotionally driven. My reaction tends to happen when I'm enraged, engaged, and distracted in a stress or an obstacle. If I take a step away from that stress and I create a purposeful pause and I create a space, it's in that space that I'm able to gather my mental and how I think about the situation and start to approach it more with a response. A response is a logically driven kind of reaction, or a logically driven to that stress. So we look at the difference between an emotionally driven versus logically driven. And what we look at is the response is always going to be beneficial over the reaction. So when we find that we're being asked to change again how we do things, we're being asked for one more layer of protection to stay in our homes or to avoid going here or there, instead of reacting, taking that step away and creating a purposeful pause, taking a couple deep breaths and responding with more logical approach, that gives us a little bit more control. What we tend to find is that when we have this pause and we respond to a stress, we have power over the stress because we are logically responding, right? But if we react to something, it's the stress that has power over us. So what we find is in this purposeful pause, there's a lot of power there. And unfortunately, many of us aren't comfortable with taking a pause or taking a step back. We're very comfortable with the knee-jerk reactions. So that's where I'm going to encourage, the breath work that we just did, a couple breaths in and out when a new announcement comes out or a change happens. Take those breaths and start to have, a little bit of space to figure out where your thoughts and your emotions are going with that news. Practice pause, and that can be through just some quiet time, music, reading, maybe a walk outside in nature by yourself, that social distancing. Give yourself that space and that pause so that you are well equipped to implement the pause when stress hits. You can give yourself that space to think through what's happening and how you're going to approach it. So some key takeaways today. I'm going to say emotions are contagious. We're talking about a lot of things being contagious right now, but emotions are very much contagious. That can be positive and that can be negative. So spread the good stuff, right? Be out there and none of us know what's happening next. Unfortunately we don't. And that's the reality. And it's okay to be uncertain. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel what we're feeling. But knowing what we have control over and doing our best to replace some of those negative emotions, some of those fearful and uncertain emotions, with some positive things that we do know. We do know how to connect with our loved ones, even if it's in a different way. We do know how to take care of ourselves, our mental, emotional well-being. So start to kind of fuel into those positive emotions, because again, as you're leading through and navigating this landscape, helping families, supporting families, they're going to be looking for us to be positive as best we can be, right? Again, now more than ever, we need to make a purposeful, conscious, daily effort to maintain our health and well-being. So like I said multiple times, these are intentional actions to take every day. Think outside of just that exercise and nutrition, but all of the things that contribute to our well-being, because the more we contribute to all of those areas of our well-being, the stronger we will be and the more able we are going to be to handle some of the stresses popping up. Pause, breathe, respond. So again, find that purposeful pause, take a deep breath like we practiced, and then find your response versus your reaction. And then lastly, there's no blueprint. There's no map. I wish that there were. We all wish that we were, but we're taking this day by day. We're in this together and finding comfort in the fact that we can kind of navigate this together, even if we don't know what's coming next. Okay? So lots of good stuff, right? Lots of stuff thrown at you. I wanted to set aside some time just for some Q&A or even comments that you might have. I will remind you, I am not an expert on COVID-19, but I am an expert on stress management. So talking through, some of those things, if you have any comments or questions, we'll open it up now.
Thank you, Jen. That was fantastic. I have one question initially, a couple more coming through, but I would also just remind everybody that you can use the chat function, you can use the questions function, or if you'd like to share your perspective or actually ask your question verbally, you can also raise your hand and we can call on you that way as well. First from Linda Irwin, would you be able to email the PowerPoint to everyone? Would we be able to make that available, Jen, so that she can send some tips to her teachers?
Absolutely. And I did forget to mention, we have an additional handout resource for you all that we can email out as well of apps. So we have some meditation and breathing apps, so things that you can download. A lot of organizations are making those apps free now during this period of time. There's even some coloring, we look at the stress management benefits of coloring and creative expression. And then there's some movement-based apps on that resource too. So yes, I will make sure that we have this PowerPoint deck accessible to be emailed out as well as that resource.
Yeah, and we will post the full recording too if you want to send that along to your teachers. And I definitely recommend looking at the app list. It was really helpful for me to visualize kind of what are the resources out there. Next question for you, Jen. Can stress cause depression?
There is research going into, and it's always been there, that there's a strong correlation between heightened levels of stress that are not managed well and anxiety and depression. So the correlation between mental health concerns and stress is strong. So it can't, it's hard to say specifically in each case, but there is signs that point to it doesn't aid in it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Next for you, do you have any good on-demand yoga classes?
One of our resource lists, things that I would say, and here's the thing, we look at all the challenges that are popping up right now. Gyms are being closed, yoga studios are being closed. But I have seen the resiliency of a community come out of yoga across the board, actually, from every community. But yoga, just because I'm part of that industry, I've seen on-demand classes popping up everywhere. And I'm talking Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. But on the resource list that we have and we'll email out to, there's an app called Down Dog. And it is an on-demand app that is, again, they made it free, I believe, until April 1st. And even the paid version isn't horrible moving forward. I think it's $7.99. But they made it free, and you can do a 15-minute chair class. You can do, a variety of different ones. So the resources out there to participate from your home in yoga classes, they're all over the place. they're great. So I would recommend just seeking those out. It won't take long to find some, I bet.
And then is there a way to get a certificate of participation for this webinar for our district? Absolutely. We'll send that out afterwards. If you registered individually, if you watched it as a group, just shoot me an email and we'll get you one for each of the people that were with you watching. Next question for you, Jen. What did you mean by sleep hygiene?
So sleep hygiene, it's such a weird word, right? Or weird term, but sleep hygiene is basically what we do to accommodate well and restful sleep. So when we look at things that fall under sleep hygiene, it's things such as turning off electronics in the room, looking at the temperature of the room. In general, we sleep a little bit better in cooler temperatures versus hotter temperatures. So it's usually about 67, 68 degrees is ideal, I believe. But we're looking at things like, we don't do work in our bed. It's kind of like trying to keep that space protected just for sleep, so that when we lay down at night, our mind knows this is the place that we sleep and we turn off. Other things that go into sleep hygiene are going to be like animals in the room. If I have dogs, they like to jump up on the bed. But anything that would disrupt your sleep is not good sleep hygiene. So hopefully that makes sense. But we're looking at just accommodating a restorative and restful sleep when we talk about sleep hygiene.
Great. A couple of folks just chimed in with their recommendations for free yoga. Apparently there's 30 days of yoga on YouTube, which is free. Someone else suggested yoga anytime. And then someone asked about Down Dog. That will be in the resource list that Jen will share with everybody after we get done here. And then moving on, this might be one that we can really open up to the crowd, and raise your hand or submit a chat if you have feedback on this. But Jen, feel free to chime in as well. We have a student teacher who's asking about how you handle the school closures, and a lot of those student teachers and their colleagues will never get to see their students again, or the friends that they had developed while they were doing that. And I think that's a great question and a really tough thing to have to handle. Any insights from Jen or people on the call about how you might manage that?
Obviously I'm not an expert in that dynamic, but I think, first of all, I'll validate it by saying that's heartbreaking. And it's okay to feel that, I will say that even today, we had a Zoom conversation with my daughter's teacher. So, again, we're being creative in how we connect. Just simply because we can't do it in person doesn't mean we lose those relationships. Those relationships can stay strong and solid in different approaches. But I'd be interested to hear what everybody else thinks, though, too. What are some ways that we can kind of, do the work around?
First, I'll go ahead and call on Christy Thielen. Christy, do you want to chime in with your thoughts on this? I've unmuted you.
Hi. Hello. Thank you, Jennifer. This is a great podcast today. I was thinking something that I've been doing with my students is I've been recording videos and I've been answering questions about the homework via video. Our district does not allow us to do face-to-face video with our students, at least at this point. But that's something I'm doing, and I think it'd be great if you send a video to your students and kind of normalize the situation a bit and talk to them about what's going on and the e-learning that you're doing and let them know that you're thinking about them. And then at the end of the year, you could send a video saying, you know, thank you for being my students. But this is really hard. I get it.
Oh.
Thanks, Christy. A couple other people chimed in with similar suggestions, a video goodbye or message, or trying to set up a Google Hangout if your district does allow that. One group is doing a virtual happy hour with staff for anyone who wants to join. So maybe another way to stay connected with colleagues as well during this time. Okay. Next question. Just one second here. In terms of practicing stress management, are there any specific strategies you would suggest for elementary children, middle school children, secondary age children for their own stress management?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to fall back onto the breath work that we practice. You know, the triangle breath is one that is often practiced with children and younger age all the way up through high school. You know, it tends to be something that we know the shape of a triangle and we can kind of visualize that. But I also think, you know, a lot of just identifying emotions is a huge part of stress management. You know, one of the things that we often talk about in kids yoga and kind of the younger school age, even up to middle school, is this ability to identify an emotion as it's happening. So, you know, I have a tough time expressing that I'm angry. I'm just going to kind of have this outburst, or I have a tough time expressing or identifying that this is stressful for me or this is sad for me. But I start to practice a little bit more of those emotions. There's quite a few different books out there too that, you know, like kids books, younger books. But when we look at that, I would say probably the two most popular ways to kind of manage stress for younger individuals is to look at breath work and to look at identifying emotions. So labeling them as much as possible.
Great.
Hopefully that works. Yeah.
And then just a positive comment that people seem to really be coming together in such an amazing way now. So it's something that we need to identify as a positive. Definitely agree with that.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, I kind of, just to piggyback that comment, you know, I saw not too long ago on social media, just this, I'm sure anyone who's spent any time on social media has seen this, but this comment that, you know, we're being asked to do a lot of things. There's a lot of challenges being thrown at us, but big picture, this is an amazing just act of solidarity, you know, of just our nation kind of coming together, our world kind of coming together to help save it. And there's something really powerful about that. The change can be threatening. It can feel threatening, but we also have to look at those intentional ways of positivity. You know, what is positive coming out of this? And that is it. You know, these people coming together and resources being shared, you know, support being offered. It's pretty amazing, I think, if we take a step back.
I see Denise has her hand raised. I unmuted you if you'd like to ask a question. Okay, she may be accidentally having her hand raised, so we'll move on to the next submitted question. I found that when I did the breath exercise during the webinar, I started to cry. So what's the best way to work through these emotions and not stay in that state? Great question.
Yeah, a lot of stuff comes up when we stop. That's not uncommon because we don't give ourselves the opportunity to stop and understand what that undercurrent is, that there can be a lot of emotions. And really what that's telling you there's nothing wrong with you. But what we're looking at is that there's this opportunity to maybe address some things there. You know, our bodies and our emotions will tell us some pretty strong messages if we listen. And so with that, perhaps we just take a little bit of time. You know, don't stay in that space, or, you know, if it feels uncomfortable to stay in that space for a long period of time, you know, come out of it and just revisit it when you feel stronger, when you feel better, to come back to it. But really what we look at is that there's an opportunity there to maybe immerse yourself into those moments of pause a little bit more, because something needs it. You know, an emotion is kind of there that perhaps needs to come out. And I think, you know, there's some therapeutic benefit in letting it out. You know, hey, we cry for a reason, and sometimes we don't know what that reason is, but it can be very, you know, cleansing for our body and our mind, to sometimes do that and embrace that emotion. There's nothing wrong with emotion.
And then kind of a follow-up on telling your students goodbye. If you are a student teacher, and this, again, a great one for the group, but how do you express that you're always there for them and that you're supportive of them without crossing any professional boundaries?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I will leave that to the group.
Feel free to raise your hand or submit a chat. And for that person who asked that question, I can also pass that to some of our AMLE leaders and see if they have some thoughts that we can share with you as well. I know it's a really tricky one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great presentation, giving me the idea to create one for my students. So yes, the resources will be available to you after the session's done. Jen, any recommendations for adapting it to communicate some of this to your students?
You know, I think, again, there's value in just simply addressing this. But we can start to talk about, you know, being creative, I guess, depending on the age range, but being creative and thinking through what all of the wellness means. We get so caught in the pigeonhole, like I've said a couple times, the pigeonhole of what wellness means. And it means, you know, physical education, it means nutrition, and yes, it means all of those things, but not being afraid to talk about the other elements of wellness, because it all is there. So I think being creative with that, but also addressing this idea of stress, labeling it, the more we talk about it and normalize that conversation, that it's real, that it's a thing, that you're not alone in feeling the stress or the effects of stress, but knowing that we have this thing that we can control. We can control our responses. We control our breath. We can start to use some of those techniques. And I think, you know, some of this is translatable across all ages. It's just a matter of how we deliver it, right? But not leaving out all the areas. You know, there's different things that we talk about. You know, obviously the occupational wellness is going to be a little bit different when we're talking to kids and families and things like that. But just being creative and staying part of the big picture.
Great. And then someone chimed in on that previous question that, you know, at this time, there's really not a wrong way to stay in touch with your students necessarily. So just, I think back to Christy's point of make sure you're within the guidelines of your district, but we're all kind of muddling through this together. So we're figuring it out as we go. Okay. Any last questions or comments or feedback? Feel free to raise your hand or submit it through the question bar. These were fantastic questions. Jen, lots of views, and it seems like I know this was certainly a needed topic right now, and it seems like folks got a lot out of it. So appreciate greatly you sharing your expertise with our membership.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. And thank you all for all of the work that you're doing. I know this is not easy, but it's not unnoticed what you're being asked to do. So keep the heads up, and we're all behind you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Hang in there, and we'll be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock with a leadership roundtable where everyone is encouraged to just share how you're dealing with the transition to remote learning, and so we can learn from each other on that. And then Friday, we'll be selecting the right remote learning resources for young adolescent learners, and that'll be at noon on Friday, so you can spend your lunch with us if you'd like to do that. And then also be sure to visit the AMLE website. We have a kind of crowdsourced page that's full of resources for every subject matter, and we're constantly adding new ones each day. And those have been curated by some of our AMLE leaders, so hopefully those will be really useful for you, as well as some remote advisory activities that are really neat to keep your students developing personally while you're out of the classroom. So be sure to keep checking in on AMLE's website for new resources throughout this time. All right, thank you all, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. And thank you again to Jennifer for sharing her expertise.
Take care.